Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Olson from DeForest PD in Wisconsin, 36 years total in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Olson.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I am too. I'm looking forward to it. I know it's been kind of a long time coming for us to finally sit down and meet. So thank you for taking the time today. I want to start with you. Give us a little bit of background.
Yeah. So my name is Jim Olson. I'm right now the chief in DeForest, Wisconsin, so just north of Madison, Wisconsin. This isn't my first department. I spent the first 29 years of my career in the Milwaukee Police Department, so I kind of grew up there as you think about it in policing. I started there at age 19. I was administrative type functions, they call it a police aide. So you kind of people who want to get in policing and you kind of start early, learn kind of the ins and outs behind the scene. And then at age 21, you get automatically basically promoted to police officer, send you to the academy. They have an employer-based academy there in Milwaukee. So, and you just take to the streets. So I got on the streets at a really young age. I was still 21 when I actually hit the streets, and kind of went from there, from patrol into specialized units. As I was a detective for years, worked in training quite a bit, worked in sexual assaults, violent crimes, things like that. And then ultimately got promoted to lieutenant and was back in sexual assault unit, which you hate to say, like you found your home, right? But it was really rewarding work. So it was, hate to say it's the love hate, but it's probably one of the best times in my career was working there, just because people really truly need help and they need you. But it's also really emotionally taxing to deal with those kinds of situations and the injured kids and the child neglect, child abuse victims, and people that are victimized by sexual predators and things like that. So it's a great place to work because it's really fulfilling, rewarding, but at the same point, it takes a toll on you emotionally. So I got lucky after 29 years. I got to come here and be the police chief and kind of apply all the things that I was going around teaching around the country. I've had great opportunities to work with IECP to teach executive leadership. For some time in Milwaukee, I was the leadership trainer for the department. One of the previous chiefs, Chief Ed Flynn, asked me to, and by ask, when the police chief says, I need you to do this, it's really not asking. You're telling you're going to do this, right? And I got to teach in the leadership and police organizations curriculum, and it hit home on so many levels, just the lessons of leadership. And I wanted the chance to really apply them, and got lucky to get to come out to DeForest and be able to apply all those things I've been teaching people for years, and put everything in place. So it's been a really good run. I can't believe it's 36 years. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like yesterday to some extent, but it's been a good run. It's been a good ride.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And there's a couple of things I want to dive into that you just talked about. But the first thing is you starting in Milwaukee, and that's a pretty like high call volume department, correct? And you were so young, 19, 20 years old. What are some of the lessons that you think that you learned early on or throughout your career that have helped you now today that you're in this leadership role? Because I'm sure that being so young and then also being in some of the hardest and most challenging assignments, you've learned some lessons along the way that you can pass along.
Yeah, so I started learning lessons at an early age. So my dad was a Milwaukee police officer. Actually, he was one of my academy instructors,
Oh,
which made
wow.
it super awkward, right? Because like I could be the only one, I know the answer, and he'd be like looking around like, nobody did refused to look at me for 24, 25 weeks. It was great. But, I learned these lessons early on, right? And, culture in policing has changed quite a bit. Like when I grew up, all we hung out with was cop families. I played hockey growing up, so it was hockey, 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 and you'd have your teammates in those families. But if there was another, law enforcement family on the team, you would hang out with them more. And I remember, my dad playing like softball, department softball leagues growing up, and you would go to their games. All the families would be there. It wasn't just like when I played department softball or baseball later, it was the guys on the team would show up, but everybody's family would show up. And afterwards, you'd either go to somebody's house or you'd go to probably the corner bar, and the parents would have time socializing and all that stuff. But it's different today. People don't, hate to say, get together like that on a regular basis as much. So from that experience, I watched my dad always be super aware of his surroundings, which was kind of weird as a kid. And then as I grew into the profession, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like this is why he did it. Um, it's weird when you're going downtown to a bank, for example. My mom worked at a bank downtown, and we're going to pick her up from work, and you'd go along, and your dad would grab a gun to go out the door, and you're thinking, okay, this is kind of weird. But as you grow into it, you go, oh, he's always on alert. He's always looking for something to happen, and he would notice the strange things that anybody who's been in policing for a while notices, right? So I learned these lessons about always kind of being aware of surroundings, and you get that hypervigilance, and you're always aware of what's going on around you. But in the same way, I look at the way I grew up and how you associate with other people who have similar circumstances, right? Other law enforcement families. And how can I create situations for them, my staff, my friends in the business, to have an outlet and still have support when you really, really need it? Because you just don't know when you're really truly going to need it, and what people recognize in you that somebody else, you yourself, may not recognize, and kind of how to capitalize on that. So I kind of grew up in that environment, and that lesson for sure kind of sticks with me even to today. Never leave anybody behind. Always try to do your best. Always try to be there for other people, because they may not recognize that they need you at probably the most awkward moment of their life. So something my dad taught me. Unfortunately, I lost him to brain cancer a few years ago, but it's something you always remember.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for your loss. And, I think that legacy lives on through the lessons that you learn and through the examples that you set. And so for you to say, hey, I learned these things, but also for other people to understand that you are that soft landing for them. And not everyone's accepting of that all the time, right? We know that not everyone wants to admit that they're struggling with something, or maybe at that time they're not. Maybe they feel like they're totally okay and they don't need anyone. But for you to be that constant source of reminding them that, hey, like I've got your back, when you need it, I'm here always. I'm always going to look out for you. I got you. Then if and when
Yeah.
they do need you, you're that soft landing and they're not having a question mark of where do I go?
Yeah, and I encourage the staff here, like, everybody, you always hear, well, I have an open door policy, I have an open door policy. I truly do. And I tell people when they start, and every time I hire a new person, and it's probably one of the most exciting things I get to do, is because most of the people I hire, it's their first job. It's their first chance to be in policing. We either send them to the academy or whatever. But I tell them, and I bring their families in, and we sit at my kind of messy table just off your screen here, but we sit there and we just talk about what their expectations are, because all parents know is what they see on the news, right? They see the bad, the bad, the bad. There's so much good that happens in policing today. And I really stress to new members and everybody in general, just focus on the new. My door is open. Come talk to me about how your day is going. If you have, a problem that you're trying to how to handle this call for service, work through your chain of command. Talk to your sergeant, talk to the lieutenant, talk to the captain, talk to the detectives. Then, if you can't figure it out, come talk to me, and we'll figure it out together. But you can kind of see it right about here on the floor. I keep juice boxes in my office purposely, because I swear the young generation, they will stick their head in the door and say, "Hey, Chief, can I have a juice box?" I learn more about people, and I have them sit down and we talk just as two human beings connecting for 5, 10 minutes while they drink a juice box, just than anything else you do, right? And to me, that's the important thing, is get them, break that cycle of always worried about the job, always worried about danger, and just sit down and talk to people, because we're all human beings at the end. And how do I get you to start to build resilience, even off your last call or your last week or something that happened at home? People got to be resilient, and we got to teach them how to be resilient and how to just isolate a little bit and just kind of walk back into building up my confidence. And sometimes if it's sitting in front of me or sitting hanging out with me for 5 minutes, that's okay, because guess what? I need that too. And it's a give and take that I get then, that little bit of mental release and mental break. So it's good. It's a little tactic. I don't know how I picked that one up, but it's kind of fun just to watch them pop in the door and, hey, can I have a juice box or snack pack sized bags? They always know where they can come find stuff. So
Juice boxes for the win. I love
hey,
it.
I tell you, it sounds corny, and I get laughed at conferences when I bring it up, but it works really well.
I love that. And I love that you said a couple times being a human being. And I think that's so important to remember that we're all human and we all have fears and we all have struggles and we all have successes and we all have things
Yeah.
going on in our lives. And it's so multifaceted. And for you to say, hey, I recognize that like we're all human beings and it's important for us to connect on a human level and to have these conversations. But I also love that you said, as a leader, I get just as much as they get. Like
Mhm.
me talking to them and connecting with them gives me as much as them talking to me, and so that two-way road of like, hey, this is helping you and your wellness, as a leader, but then it's also helping everyone else as well. I think that's really important to remember. And I do want to talk a little bit. You said, how do we teach them to be more resilient? How do we give them the tools to be successful? And you said earlier when you were giving your bio that you used to teach executive leadership. And so,
Yeah.
can you dive a little bit into maybe some of the learning objectives and lessons that you taught and how you can set your organization up for success from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of goes back when I was teaching, this leadership course in Milwaukee. We were trying to put as many people through it as we can. Now you had a department of 2,000 sworn members,
Mm-hmm.
1,800 sworn members, and we're mixing civilians in because they're just as important as anybody else. You look at a dispatcher or like a call taker, for example, they don't get to see the result. They just get to hear the panic in people's voice, right? So trying to blend that together. And I remember one afternoon teaching stress and resilience was the lesson that we have, stress management, it was called at the time. And all of a sudden, we just went to a break, and everybody's phone started blowing up. And one of the members of our department committed suicide. I think as I'm teaching this lesson, everybody knew this person. I knew the person. It was just like this overwhelming, oh my God, how am I going to recover from this? Because in that moment, you have to start. There's grieving, 100% there's grieving. Whenever you lose somebody, there's grieving involved, organizational grieving. But how do you start to get people to build resilience already and start to think positively? Because, you can look at the APA's 10 guidelines and all that kind of stuff. And I've always focused on a couple, which is basically have connections, right? Is how do you have to have, and you have to surround yourself with positive people. You can't surround yourself with negativity because everything we do is negative. Nobody really calls the police to say, hey, come on over. We're having a barbecue. Would you like to come have some lunch with us? We get there when somebody does something at the end of the barbecue, and then we've got to deal with it, or we deal with the fallout of people going after a night out in the town going home, and something bad happens. They crash, they get stopped for WI or whatever the case might be, or something bad happens. But I really try to focus people in on making a positive connection. And who do you have in your life when something goes not as according to your plan? Everybody has a plan in life. Everybody has a plan day to day. I have a plan day to day. It never really seems to work out that way, but you have a plan going into the day. But how do you get people to build resilience? To me, it starts with making connections. The other thing, we really get wrapped up in is seeing every problem as something insurmountable. And like I talked about, having people just come down and sit down and talk as two people, that really kind of, to me, breaks down this. You're the chief. You're way up here, and I'm just down here. No, we're two people. We're talking. We're not going to see everything. If you have a problem that you can't get past and nobody's helping you, or I happen to be the only supervisor in the building at one time, come talk to me because guess what? Everything we can figure anything out together. Two heads are better than one. I've been around the block more than once, and the worst thing you can do is try to live something alone and capitalize on the number of people around you that are there to help you, that we're here to support you, and everything you do. My network is kind of large because I've taught all over our great country and up into Canada. I've had students from around the world. And it's interesting, even when I've had people come in, we did some gender-based violence training and added some leadership stuff to it. We had people from Morocco and Egypt and everything come over. And everybody has the same issues, right? And you start talking about, oh, the stress of the job, but it's how do you react to the stress of the job? And that's where I really kind of, put value with the human connection, the human relation, and say, okay, we've both been on different assignments, not at the same time, but I've had bad cases in my life. I've had sexual assault cases of children when I had a young child. I had kids that were physically abused, and you just look at kids having emergency surgery to take out 14 inches of their colon because they were abused by a boyfriend. How do you see that? And as a parent, not respond negatively. It's by building a network and not seeing everything as something is insurmountable or, people make mistakes. And, I've said it, I learned it from Chief Flitt. Actually, I heard him say it. It really resonated with me. And that's, we will learn from our mistakes, but we'll hold ourselves accountable for misconduct. And that's how we live. You can make mistakes in this job. It happens. You try not to. Everybody's got to try to be perfect, but you're going to make mistakes. And some people see mistakes as something they'll never come back from. I'll never get past it. Everybody makes mistakes. I mean, we can deal with mistakes. Just own up to it. Let's learn together. So those couple little things on the really long-winded side of it is just kind of how I just try to institute that with people and kind of preach that a little bit to them.
Thank you. Yeah. And I wrote down kind of the two learning objectives. I love how you said, like, how do you react to the stress of the job? And you talked about connections and positivity as two things to look at. But I think that we sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, I've done this, going back to you saying, like, we're human and not perfect and we're going to make mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life and I've learned from most of them. You hope you learn from all of them, but there's maybe been things when I was younger that it took me a few times to learn, from. But I think that we have to give ourselves credit and understand that we do have the ability to choose how we react to things. And some things are obviously going to be so much harder than others. There's going to be a scale, or a range of difficulty. But for us to say, hey, like, we have the choice, we have the ability to choose how we respond, how we react, and how can we set ourselves up for success with tools and proactive tools to be able to manage those reactions to the stress. And I love that you said positivity, trying to practice that as much as you can. I try to catch myself every time I'm complaining about something. I try to look at things from different perspectives. I try to wake up every day and, say things that I'm grateful for. I think that there are things that we can do as a consistent practice to understand if and when we are being negative and can we choose positivity instead. And then connections, that takes effort. You have to make sure that you're putting time and energy into making those connections with people, and so maybe it is popping your head into the chief's office and saying, hey, can I have a juice box, and having 5 minutes, or, maybe it's cultivating relationships outside of the job with, your family, your spouses, your friends. What does that look like? And you're right, there has to be some sort of disconnect from the negativity and from the stress of the job. And so I appreciate you explaining, some of those things that you teach. One of the things you said earlier that I wanted to circle back to was this idea that, and we talked about this offline, but you said earlier, hey, like, as a leader, I get out, just as much out of talking to other people as other people do talking to me. And we know that leaders tend to put themselves last. You tend to take care of everybody else and you kind of forget about your own personal wellness. And you had shared with me that there was kind of a time where, maybe you had done that. You had put yourself last and, you were kind of focusing on everyone else. Can you talk a little bit about that? And how did you come to the realization as a leader that, hey, if I'm going to be able to lead in the way that I want to and be effective, I have to make sure that I'm good too?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thanks for letting me tell the story because when you really develop a team and, my goal coming here was to develop a really positive culture. Not that things were negative when I started here, but, maybe we needed to refine a few things. But you really want to develop a culture where everybody takes care of everybody, right? It takes a village to raise a child. Well, guess what? It takes a village to raise a police department, and everybody that works here is part of our village. And, I started here in 2019, 2020, December. My dad, we thought he had a stroke in the middle of the night. Turns out not. He popped a primary brain tumor and he had glioblastoma. And he had to have surgery like a couple days later. Now, this is in the height of COVID, right? Where my mom, God bless her, she couldn't go see him in the hospital. They wouldn't let you in the door. So I get this phone call. I mean, I remember I had a village board meeting really late the night before, and I get this call in the middle of the night, like, something happened to your dad. He's in the ambulance. What do I do? And I said, okay, we made a plan. I got in the car and started driving, the couple hours to her house. And you come to the realization quickly that life is changing. And I've never been one that shied away from work. Right, I am totally accustomed. And still, my captain laughs at me when I leave after like 8.5 hours. Like, oh, a short day today. Just because I've always been here since starting 10, 11, sometimes 12, 13 hours. Not because I need to stay here that long. I mean, I got stuff to do. Don't get me wrong, but you're just trying to really be here for people and learn people. And I put myself last that way. And it was, fast forward now a couple of years, and my dad dies April of 2022. He made it like a month longer than the doctor thought he would. But I get back, and literally we had his funeral, and there was leftover food. And my mom says, "Oh, what are we going to do with this? Take it to work. They'll eat it at work, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I suppose." So loaded up my car, and I first thing I went, on the way back 2 hours, I stopped here at work to drop off food for everybody. And the week after, we had our award ceremony. And after the award ceremony, I'm in our kitchen lunchroom area, and one of my young officers came in, and she just looked at me and said, "How are you doing?" And I thought, interesting question. Well, I'm doing. I never try to. I don't put my problems on other people, right? Like I just try to internalize it a little bit. And I said, "Yeah, I'm doing all right." She said, "Like, you need to take some time." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You're here a lot, and you've got a lot going on lately. I mean, your dad, it's been just some craziness. You had COVID. You're the only like department head that came to work every day during COVID. A lot of people work from home. How do I do my job from home? I can't really do that consistently. You need to take some time for like yourself." And in that moment, it just like this little light bulb like shined down on me, like you see in the movies, right? Like somebody else recognized that, I too needed a little bit of a break, and I never cut myself slack. I always just try to say, listen, the leader's got to be strong, the leader's got to be present, the leader has to, the leader has to, the leader has to. I need to be here for these people because they're a tremendous group of law enforcement professionals that work here, and I wanted to be there to support them, and I wanted to be here to make their life and their job as best as it could possibly be. And in that moment, I kind of forgot about myself. I buried myself in the grief of losing my dad and everything else around me, and just let it spiral a little bit. And somebody else noticed it and said something to me, and I'll never forget, that feeling, because it was almost like somebody noticed. It was almost like that big wow, like in a way, it was a shock that somebody noticed, because who thinks they pay attention to me, right? But somebody noticed and said something. So to me, that was kind of one of those impactful things that was just like, yeah, I guess I really do put myself last. And yeah, I still to this day feel like I do continue to put myself last, even though I know I shouldn't. Um, but I'm trying to find a little bit better balance. And if that means working my day and getting out of here and going and doing something else and finding ways to relieve stress myself, then that's kind of where that sits. But just to have somebody else recognize it really kind of, I'll never forget that feeling when it was called out to me.
I'll say that what you just said is relatable to almost every leader I've talked to, if not every leader I've talked to.
Sure.
I think that we all tend to do that. We all tend to focus on everyone else and kind of put ourselves last. And I have had the conversation before of like, how do you balance personal stress and tragedy while also trying to be the leader within an organization? And, you don't feel like you can complain down, or, you don't want to dump that on everybody else, but you also need support systems and kind of don't know how to navigate it on your own island. And so I know that that's extremely relatable to a lot of people of like, how do you manage that, and how do you take care of yourself, while also trying to be an effective leader? And, we've had this conversation before. Is it chicken or egg? Like, do you have to take care of yourself first in order to take care of everybody else? Or do you take care of everybody else and then, then you realize that you have to take care of yourself, which one comes first? And so it's, a dynamic conversation. But the thing that stuck out to me is that your goal of coming into this organization was to create a culture in which everyone looked out for each other. And then for someone to look out for you, mission accomplished, right? everyone's looking out for each other, including looking out for leadership, for someone to have that awareness to come up to you and be like, hey, are you good? Like asking the question. And then after you say, yeah, I'm good, they didn't say, okay, thanks, chief, and walk away. They were like, wait, actually, I think you're not. I think that you need to take some time for yourself. Like, what a huge testament to the culture that you created and that you wanted to create coming into the organization.
Yeah, and it's not me create, it's everybody creates, right? I don't
Yeah.
create culture. I just set the parameters for people to thrive, right? And I appreciate what you're saying, Paige. I do. But in the same way, culture doesn't change unless they all buy in. And when I started, you would get the terms get different no matter where I talk about it, but critical incidents or significant incidents are probably the thing. And a while it was the officer's no longer here, but he'd be like, "Oh, you guys really need to do something about that." That
Mm.
happened, but now we get staff who say, "Hey, so and so had a really significant call, or they did CPR on an infant, or they had a really bad car crash they went to. Maybe we need to get a debrief for them." Right? They may not have all the connections to make it happen, but that whole culture, that change is just so powerful to watch them look out for each other.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to sit back sometimes and watch them take care of each other. It's really, really impressive.
I love what you said that, and I want to make sure I'm repeating it correctly. So you said you set the parameters, but everyone else is responsible as an entire organization. Everyone is responsible for the culture.
Yeah, I'm responsible too. If I set up situations and policies in such a way that people can't do certain things, um, I'm failing. I'm failing them. And that's probably the most significant thing you can fail is your people.
Well, thank you. And I think that everything that we just talked about is wellness. I think that this whole conversation has been, around executive wellness, culture, which is also wellness. But as an organization, I know that there are three pillars of wellness that you guys focus on, and you guys are doing some like kind of cool, unique things. So, can you kind of give us some insight into those pillars and some of the things that you're doing? You showed me one of the things offline.
Yeah.
So,
The chief has to have a pickleball paddle at his desk. I think that's the rule. But no, I mean, we're trying everything we can to get people involved. And when I say everybody, I mean myself included, right? Because the worst thing about COVID was we're trapped at these desks now.
Mhm.
And, it wouldn't be Paige coming out to talk to me in person. Now we just get together on Zoom. But, there's days where you sit here and you're like, wow, I've been at my desk for 5.5 hours and still haven't gotten up to just walk around and talk to people or go to the restroom or anything like that. It's been kind of the bad part of it. So we're trying to find ways to get people moving. And I literally just sent out the summer pickleball league opportunity. So whoever's interested, and I'll selfishly say, like, I have a contact group for family members, so significant others, parents. I'm finding more and more of with my really young officers. I include them on it and say, hey, guess you guys are willing to participate too because you're part of our family. So sometimes you get a little bit of, peer pressure from wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, parents, all that kind of stuff. To try to get everybody involved because we try long-term success. Our wellness committee, we have a wellness committee that looks at different aspects. How do we get people involved? They did just a simple movement challenge earlier this year that was really, really good. Like you get points for drinking 16 ounces of water, and at every 16 ounces of water you drank, you got a point. Or they had some whole parameters, how many steps you took, how much this you did, how much physical activity you did. So we're looking after the physical wellness. Actually, in our garage, I had it taped out. We taped out a pickleball court so that, there's no reason that people can't be active, right? You don't have to go. You can close the garage. Nobody will see you. It's okay. You can be undercover yet and still, hit the little pickleball around a little bit just to get moving, right? It's a fun little sport. It's smaller than a tennis court, so it's not like you got to race all over the place, but it is good. And I got into it by a colleague, a former chief that moved to a different state now for a job, but he kind of got me into it. It's actually a lot of fun. We actually some years ago, I had a basketball hoop installed in our garage, so it started out as a way to connect with kids. Hey, the kids can come in and they can shoot hoops at the officer, and they still do. But too, every now and then you'll catch the officers just throwing a basketball around for a few minutes before shift, after shift, during shift for a little bit. If it's raining, I've seen kids in there having a little basketball contest with the officers. It's kind of fun to watch them, just have a different environment, but humanize the badge, right? So there's still a human being behind this thing. And you get to do that. On top of that, we do mental health debriefs. So annually, our Internet Crimes Against Children task force members have always gotten like a mental health debrief with a professional. Just whatever they talk about, I don't care. All I want to know is that they attended. That's all I need to know. I'll pay the bill. Just send it to me. As long as they attend, they get their hour session. We've now expanded that to include everybody in the department. So our civilian members, our civilian administrator, office manager, my executive assistant, she's included in that. All of our department members, everybody gets that opportunity now. So it's not just, oh, you have to be something special to get that. And then on top of that, now we look at financial wellness. And our financial wellness, I just had a fiduciary company come in, and they did a presentation about a program they do. And then they will do a free 3-session like analytics for you personally and your family. Like, how's your wealth plan look? Because when I started, it was this whole, deferred comp was just coming around. It just started in the early 90s. Yeah, you should get into that someday. God, I wish I would have got into it right away, because you could have, had more wealth to retire with sooner and things like that. But so we bought in a financial planner, and I had people from the department go for this program, and I'm still in the middle of it for myself going, hey, when can I retire? But it's just you're trying to hit a couple different areas for them to realize I still want to expand and get into like nutritionists and things like that and say, hey, here's another option to help you with maintaining healthy weight or to eat the right food when you're at work so your mind is clear and you have optimal energy and things like that. But we're still working through this as a team, and everybody's getting their input in. Our wellness committee does a really good job trying to identify things people could use and things we need. We have for a department our size of 23 sworn and 3 civilian, we have a pretty robust workout space upstairs with ample equipment for the officers to go up and work out before shift, after shift. So we're very fortunate that way to have that. And our police foundation that we started a couple of years ago really kind of helps us maintain that readiness.
Thank you. Yeah, when you said pickleball, and then you showed me your pickleball. It was a racket?
It's a paddle.
Paddle.
The paddle. It's a pickleball paddle.
Shows me. I played it once, but when you were saying, like, yeah, we get together our pickleball league together, I was like, that sounds like so much fun. And if you could get your family involved too, like what a good time. And I think that sometimes, and you reminded me, I think that sometimes we forget that there are opportunities for you guys to kind of expand outside of the organization too. Like I know out here, and obviously every city is different, but where I live, I'm in Phoenix. There have probably been 20 plus indoor and outdoor pickleball courts that have popped up in the last year. Can you rent out space? Can you get involved in leagues that they already have going on? And you bring your own team. Like, how does it look for you guys to kind of get together and for you to say, hey, we had a garage space that we taped off and it works, I think getting creative and realizing that you have maybe more options than you think. And sometimes people think that they're really confined to, maybe what they currently have. And for you to be a smaller mid-sized organization to say, hey, we're able to do all of these things through effort. And then also a POA helping you guys out is really helpful for other people to understand how they can do it too. So thank you.
Yeah.
My final question for you, and I know you shared some advice earlier, but I have to ask the question for the younger generation, what words of wisdom would you share with them that either you wish that you knew when you were younger that would have helped you, or something you've learned along the way that you want to pass on to them?
Yeah, I guess, there's a couple of things that come to mind. And realistically, your time in policing is going to fly. Like I said it before, I can't believe I'm going to be finishing up year 36 in August and starting year 37. But you have to make connections for yourself and carry those forward. I say I've been blessed. I really have been. I've been able to get out around this country and make connections with other law enforcement leaders. So at a moment, I can call people in just about every state and just bounce ideas off them, talk about issues that I'm facing. And I have a robust network, but start building your network now because even outside of the mental health realm, right? Like for policing challenges that come up, having somebody else to go to is super helpful. And it's actually relieving of stress trying to figure out where am I going to get this answer from? So having a good, robust network, every training you go to is an opportunity to build your network. Find somebody, make a connection, get a number. Don't worry about email because that stuff changes. Get a connection, a phone number. Most people will hold on to their phone numbers their life because they don't want to change their personal phone. Don't get business phones, get personal phones.
Mm.
Get that number and have these things available, right? Because in your moment, you're going to need it and you need to find people that can be there for you. Don't find the pretenders, find the contenders, if you will. Find the ones that are truly going to be there for you and give you the best advice when you really, truly need it, because that's what's going to help shape you in your journey in law enforcement.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so happy we were able to
Yeah.
finally meet. And thank you for sharing your words of wisdom and all the things that you guys are doing organizationally. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Of course.